My name's Danielle Christy, and I am a school psychologist and also a family member-led trainee. So I have a darling son who's 5 and has Fragile X and autism. This is my partner, Dr. Kelsey Oliver. We share a passion for inclusion. So when we met, we realized that we were kind of the perfect mix because I've spent the last several years of my career really building an inclusive program in the schools that I work at. And Kelsey spent the last several years of her career researching and reviewing research that shows inclusion works. So what we decided to do our project on is general education teachers, really conducting some focus groups to examine their experiences of having children with autism in their classroom, to get an idea of what tools they're using, what evidence-based practices that they might be using already or potentially could use in the future. I'll briefly summarize just a bit of the research that's demonstrated the benefits of inclusion, both for children with autism and those without. So when we compare children in inclusive classrooms compared to more segregated classrooms, students with autism have better verbal communication, adaptive behavior, social skills. They also show increases in IQ and play skills. But beyond just improving their outcomes, we actually also see that this improves outcomes for typically developing peers as well. And so typically developing peers show positive social emotional growth. They have more comfort with disability in general, and they don't have adverse impacts on their academic achievement, which I think is a common misconception about inclusion. And I think that if we target inclusion early, this improves outcomes not only for kids with disabilities, but for our diverse community as a whole when we celebrate and accept difference. So what we wanted to look at with our focus groups, we already know that inclusion works best when teachers have knowledge, resources, and attitudes that all impacts the success of inclusion. What we wanted to find out is, what are you guys currently doing to support inclusion? How do these link to what we know are some evidence-based practices? And then really targeting future trainings there so that we can reduce the burden. So we know that teachers, I think we can all agree, have enough on their plate, and we want to be really thoughtful when we're adding something else to their plate. And so that's really what we looked at in this study. So one of the evidence-based practices we chose to focus on is called classroom pivotal response treatment. Some of you might be familiar with it. It's modified from PRT. It's a naturalistic behavior intervention for children with autism. And they got special education teacher feedback to design this to be used in the classroom. The other evidence-based practice we chose to focus on is a more broad strategy for all children with disabilities. It's called Universal Design for Learning. And instead of a curriculum, it's really a framework for teachers to develop all of their lessons and activities with varied learners in mind. So from the beginning, they're designing instruction, assessment, teaching practices with multiple modalities for kids to show what they know, to learn in different modalities. So that instead of having to go back and retrofit or modify lessons, it's designed from the beginning with multiple learning styles in mind. We chose these because they both show great promise and research has shown they're efficacious for children with autism. I kind of alluded to this. These are our research questions. And we had some inclusion criteria as well. So we posted this flyer on social media, emailed our various contacts in districts in the area and out of the area, and had a great response at first. So lots of people were interested, but as is common in this type of research, we had quite a bit of attrition, and so ended up with just 12 teachers who did all of the online surveys and did focus groups with us. As for our inclusion criteria, they just had to be the lead teacher in a general education classroom, have taught elementary or middle school, so K-8 was what we were looking at, and have had at least one kiddo with autism in their class, either currently or in the past.
So the participants in our study had an average of 11.8 years of teaching experience, and there was quite a range from 3 to 25 years of experience, which we see as one of the strengths of our study. 100% of the sample was female, which is maybe less of a strength of the study, but pretty accurate representation of the field of education. And their students were included an average of 75% of the school day, and the majority of our sample taught at a public school, and private schools and charter schools were also represented as well. The majority of our participants taught kindergarten, you see 50% of the sample there, but we also had grades 1 through 4 represented in our sample too. So our methods included holding 4 one-hour focus groups that included 1 to 4 participants per group, depending on how many people showed up. We used an interview guide with pre-established questions and flexible follow-up questions as needed to gather the information that we really wanted that was pertinent to our research questions. And we sent the teachers questions and some brief information about CPRT and UDL ahead of time, as well as some short vignettes about students that we made up, describing some of their social skills, some of their communication skills, academic skills, maybe potential challenges that they might exhibit in the classroom. And those were just to give teachers the same jumping off point for discussion, but they were really encouraged to share their own unique experiences as well, or if they had similar students as the ones in the vignette. So during the focus groups, we were asking what are the strategies they're currently using, and as well as what would they use with that child in the vignette. We asked them how they would might need to adapt their practices for inclusion and barriers they might anticipate. And then we also asked them to reflect on CPRT and UDL and consider how they might use those in the classroom, as well as what might be challenging about those. So for data analysis, we used open coding thematic analysis of our transcripts. So we had at least 2 independent observers read through the transcripts and start identifying and grouping common themes in the responses based on what our research questions were. And here are some of the results. So in terms of strategies teachers used, priming was very frequently mentioned, and teachers often referred to this as front-loading, so giving them a preview of what's to come before they have to actually do it. Peer modeling was also very frequently mentioned, and as well as things like visual supports. So commonly mentioned were visual schedules for transitions, visual timers. Another thing that was really interesting were reward systems. A lot of teachers mentioned using reward systems and that they were simple to do and motivating for their students, and similar with using first-then instructions. So these are some the components of CPRT that teachers were consistently responding positively to. Teachers often said that these are just good teaching strategies, especially things like having student attention and providing clear and appropriate cues. And these are some components with maybe some more mixed reviews from teachers. So while many teachers found a lot of these very valuable and impactful in their classrooms, they also reported that things like sharing control and giving direct reinforcement and following a student's lead would be difficult or would require adaptations to their practices in some way. So common themes related to these components were teachers having concerns that a student would only want to talk about or do one specific thing or one topic of interest, and that might go down a rabbit hole and sort of derail the rest of the lesson. And in terms of UDL, or Universal Design for Learning, participants really only had positive comments to say about these components, and here are some examples of how they're used. You'll notice that teachers report a lot of strategies regarding the multiple means of expression, so different ways that students can express their knowledge or their learning. It's also interesting to see that teachers talk about incorporating student interests a lot, which is a component of CPRT, so you can see some crossover there. And then here are some common barriers to inclusion, things like student characteristics, time, both for the student themselves and the other students in the class, social acceptance, and some teacher characteristics where they said that this is just my learning style or my teaching style and it would be difficult to adapt. So in summary, we see that CPRT and UDL can have many applications and benefits in inclusive classrooms, and that teachers just find a lot of these things to be good teaching strategies. Few teachers in our sample acknowledge formal training in any of these, but regardless, they were able to identify several ways that they would use these strategies, which is very promising. And we also found that many of the strategies they use align with evidence-based practices. So our next steps will focus on this section. So developing training for teachers, general education teachers, based on these evidence-based practice that they're already reporting work well for their classrooms, and potentially involving UDL components as well. And then we'll also consider how to adapt CPRT for use in a general education classroom based on teachers' feedback. So a couple limitations. The vast majority of our teachers had primarily positive attitudes towards inclusion, and these responses might look very different if attitudes were less positive. We only had teachers from K through 4 classrooms and a small all-female sample, and there might have been some response bias with social desirability of the responses they were giving, where they kind of just maybe wanted to say what we wanted to hear to a certain extent.
Yeah, and we just want to thank our mentors, all the teachers that took their time. These focus groups were at 6 p.m. at night after a long day of teaching, so you can imagine they're pretty dedicated teachers. And this LEND program, we both had a great experience, and if that's my son and my daughter, I wouldn't be here without them for inspiration.
The UC Davis Mind Institute was created in 1998 with a promise to find cures for neurodevelopmental disorders. Every day, our physicians and researchers come closer to fulfilling that promise. Their groundbreaking research on autism, Fragile X syndrome, chromosome 22q11.2 deletion syndrome, ADHD, and other brain disorders are helping children achieve their fullest potential. Please visit our website to find out more about current studies, upcoming events, and how you can help make a difference.